Hi, I am Megan Levangie, and this week I read chapter 4 of Reading the Bible with the Founding Fathers by Daniel Dreisbach. So, this chapter was about how the Founding Fathers used biblical rhetoric in politics. Many historians agree that much of the biblical references from the Founding Fathers are more of an attempt to strengthen rhetorical authority rather than a true call to Christianity. So, according to Dreisbach, there are 5 reasons for the use of the Bible in political rhetoric. The first is to enrich the common language. So, with this, he discusses the fact that the Bible would have been the most known book of the time among both learned persons and common persons. So, therefore, biblical rhetoric would have been considered the vernacular. So, in using biblical terminology, it would convey authority while remaining accessible to every American. And in this chapter, he uses an example of an essay written by Wilson Carey McWilliams. And in this essay, he writes that scripture was common even amongst different races and classes, making it a common ground amongst any hostilities that were happening in the nation. To add to this, Dr. John Barnhill points out in his review of Inventing a Christian America, the Myth of the Religious Founding, that several founding fathers were deists, and therefore they believed that religion in some facet was good for the American people. So the second reason that Dreisbach points out is that the Bible was used to enhance the weight of power and rhetoric. So many of the founding fathers believed that the sacredness of the text would invoke authority and persuasion to their words. With this, they hoped it would allow the people to believe their words to be true and convey any moral implications. Building on this would be the third reason, which is that using the Bible would identify and define standards. So because scripture was authoritative and transcendent, it was seen as having the ability to create standards for political leadership, as well as civil government and public life. So a book that I read by Frank Lambert describes this idea too. This book is The Founding Fathers and the Place of Religion in America. And he does this by stating that the Constitution sought to promote general welfare and to secure blessing for liberty. He doesn't argue by any means that the founding was a Christian founding. In fact, he argues the opposite. He argues that it's more of a secular founding, but with this biblical rhetoric in the midst of it. And so in order to accomplish general welfare and the blessing for liberty, he would use biblical rhetoric within the Constitution. The fourth reason presented is that the Bible would help illuminate the role of providence in the affairs of men and nations. At this time, many Americans believed in providential history, believing that the Bible is the historical record of God's providence through time. This belief was so rooted that James Madison wrote in Federalist Paper 37 that it was through God's hand that they pulled through some critical points of the Revolution. Lambert, again, in his book, points out that Madison often applauded the Constitution and its reverence toward religious life. Their biblical rhetoric was how God was guiding them toward a new nation in God's divine plan. And finally, biblical rhetoric was important for revealing the character and designs of God. So while much of the rhetoric was used to advance their own language, Dreisbach argues that there was still an element of theology that the Founding Fathers desired to follow. So this reason shows that they had an element of reverence for God, portraying his sovereignty in how he deals with nations and people. And overall, I thought this was a really interesting chapter just to see how biblical rhetoric played into their politics and how the role of religion kind of played into the founding and the writing of the Constitution.